I thought it was just another lonely rainy night, until Evan knocked on my door. I hesitated, but I opened the door. And the next morning, I knew I had lost something, or found something I didn't dare name. Ever since I married Richard 2 years ago, life had settled into a strange kind of stillness. We weren't unhappy, exactly, just absent from each other. He traveled often for work, real estate conferences, client retreats, always somewhere else. The house was beautiful, quiet, and well maintained, but emotionally, it felt hollow. I spent most evenings alone, cooking for one, watching the same shows, waiting for texts that didn't come. I didn't hate him, I just didn't miss him when he was gone. That's what scared me the most. I used to think second marriages were about comfort, stability, healing. I never expected mine to feel so disconnected. There was no fighting, no affairs, no cruelty, just silence, a growing space between us that neither of us tried to close. Then Evan came to live with us. He was Richard's son from a previous marriage, 20 years old. Taking a break from college after a rough year. I didn't know him well, only met him twice before he moved in. Polite, quiet, a bit withdrawn. I thought I'd just give him space. Be cordial, maybe offer him a meal now and then. But something shifted the day he arrived. His presence filled the house in ways Richard never did. He noticed things, fixed a dripping faucet without being asked, complimented my cooking, made eye contact that lingered just a second too long. I told myself I was imagining it. But part of me noticed, too. Evan had only been living with us for 3 weeks. But something about the way he carried himself, it unsettled me. Not in a bad way. Just different. He was quiet, but not cold, observant in a way that felt intentional. One afternoon, I mentioned offhand that the porch light had been flickering. The next morning, it was fixed. No note, no mention, just done. I began to notice the way he'd linger in the kitchen after dinner, pretending to scroll on his phone but stealing glances in my direction. He was never inappropriate, never crossed any line, but there was tension, subtle, unnamed, floating in the air between us. One night, I caught him watching me while I folded laundry on the couch. His eyes didn't drop when I looked up. He held my gaze just long enough to make my breath catch. Then he looked away, like nothing happened. That moment haunted me. I started questioning myself. Was I imagining it? Was this just what it felt like having a grown stepson in the house? Had I become so starved for attention that I was reading too much into ordinary things? I told myself to shake it off. But that weekend, Richard left for a work trip again. The house shrank down to just Evan and me, two strangers orbiting the same silence. And somehow, that silence felt warmer than it ever had with my husband. That was the weekend everything changed. Richard had planned the weekend getaway for us, his idea of a romantic gesture before another long business trip. But when a last-minute client emergency came up, he insisted I still go, said I needed the break. Evan volunteered to drive me, offered to stay nearby in case I needed help. The cabin sat deep in the woods, quiet, isolated, just trees, wind, and the smell of pine in the air. It was meant to be peaceful. That first night, rain started falling early, soft at first, then heavier. By 10, thunder rolled in, and the power flickered. I lit a candle, pulled a throw blanket around my shoulders, and curled up in bed with a book I couldn't focus on. The storm outside grew louder. I found myself listening for footsteps, for presence. Then, 3 gentle knocks. I froze. Claire? Evan's voice was muffled through the door. The lights went out. Do you mind if I come in for a bit? My heart thudded. I stared at the door, unsure why I hesitated. Yeah, I said after a beat. It's fine. Come in. He stepped inside, shirt slightly damp from the rain, hair tousled. The candlelight flickered across his face. For a second, neither of us spoke. He looked at me, not just looked. Saw me, and something shifted. The storm outside kept raging. But the real storm? It was the one starting inside that quiet room. Evan sat at the edge of the bed, rubbing his hands together for warmth. The storm howled louder now, wind slapping branches against the window. He glanced at the flickering candle and smiled faintly. "This feels like something out of a horror movie," he joked softly. I let out a quiet laugh, more to break the tension than because it was funny. "Are you cold?" I asked. He nodded, a little. I hesitated, then lifted the blanket just slightly. An invitation, harmless, I told myself. He slid under, careful not to touch me. We laid there side by side, both staring at the ceiling as the thunder cracked outside. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable, but it was charged. I felt at the moment his arm brushed mine. A spark, so subtle it could have been nothing. But I didn't pull away. Neither did he. My breath caught as I realized I was hyper-aware of everything, his breathing. The heat from his skin. The way the blanket stretched between us like a thread holding back a flood. "I never liked storms," he murmured. "They make everything feel too quiet." I turned my head to look at him. His face was relaxed, but his eyes weren't. They were searching, asking. "Storms used to scare me too," I whispered, until I stopped being scared of silence. That's when it happened. He reached up, slowly, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered just a second too long. A second was all it took. I didn't speak. I didn't stop him. And in that breath between thunder and breathlessness, I felt something shift in me. Something break, or bloom, I couldn't tell which. All I knew was that the space between us was gone. And I didn't move away. I don't remember leaning in. It just happened. 1 minute, we were lying there in silence. The next, our foreheads were almost touching. I could feel his breath on my lips, warm, slow, hesitant. My heart thudded so loud I was sure he could hear it. And then, his hand moved, softly, tentatively. It rested on my waist. Not gripping, just being there. The weight of it made my whole body tense. Not from fear, from awareness. Every part of me screamed that I should stop this. That I should say something, anything. But I didn't. I just closed my eyes. When his lips brushed mine, I didn't flinch. It wasn't a kiss. Not really. More like a question. And my answer was silence. We stayed like that, barely touching. Not speaking, as the storm roared outside. The candle flickered shadows on the walls, painting shapes that felt too intimate to name. I hated how much I didn't want it to end. I hated how natural it felt. When I finally pulled back, it wasn't because I came to my senses. It was because I was afraid of how much further I would go if I didn't. Evan looked at me, wide-eyed, unsure, but not ashamed. The shame belonged to me. I turned away, pulling the blanket higher up my chest, pretending to focus on the storm. But my skin still buzzed where he touched me, and deep inside, I knew something had been awakened. Something I couldn't easily put back to sleep. We didn't speak the next morning. I woke up before him, heart pounding, skin still warm from the night before. Evan's arm had slipped around me sometime in the early hours. And for a second, just a second, I let myself enjoy it. The weight of it, the safety, the intimacy. Then the shame returned like a wave crashing over my chest. I slipped out of bed carefully, not waking him, threw on a sweater, made coffee I didn't drink. Every sound in that tiny kitchen felt louder than it should have, spoon against mug. Cabinet door creaking open, like the house was judging me. When Evan finally came downstairs, his hair messy, voice quiet, I couldn't look at him. I kept my back turned, pretending to clean a counter that was already spotless. "Morning," he said softly. I just nodded. The drive back home was silent. He didn't push, didn't ask, just drove, and I hated that part of me wanted him to say something. To make sense of it for me. To take the blame. But he didn't. Back home, I busied myself with laundry, errands, anything to avoid being in the same room as him for too long. Richard came back 2 days later, completely unaware. He kissed me on the cheek and told me the cabin looked great on Instagram. I smiled, lied. But inside, everything had shifted. I couldn't stop thinking about that night. Not the touch, not the kiss, but the way I felt. The ache I hadn't realized had been building inside me for years. And how easily it had unraveled when someone finally saw me. Not as a wife. Not as a stepmother. But as a woman. And that terrified me more than anything else. I tried to convince myself that what happened at the cabin was a moment, one brief, emotionally charged lapse in judgment. Something I could tuck away, ignore, pretend never happened. But I couldn't. Every time I saw Evan, I felt it, that tension, that memory, that pull. He didn't bring it up. Not once. He acted normal, polite, helpful, distant when I needed space, but there was something in his eyes. A quiet knowing, like he was waiting, not pushing, not forcing, just waiting. And maybe that's what made it harder. If he had been reckless, inappropriate, anything like that, I would have shut it down, called it what it was. But he wasn't. He was careful, kind. He treated me like I mattered, like I wasn't invisible. And that was dangerous. One night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at myself like I didn't recognize the woman looking back. I wasn't young. I wasn't reckless. I was supposed to know better. But I couldn't deny it. I didn't feel dead inside anymore. I felt alive, confused, yes, ashamed, absolutely, but more alive than I had in years. I kept thinking, if no one ever found out, would it still be wrong? Was the sin in the act, or in the intention? I stayed up late that night, pacing the hallway like a ghost. I stopped outside his door. My fingers grazed the doorknob. I didn't turn it, I just stood there, listening. To the silence. To my heart. To the version of myself I didn't know how to face. It started with something small. A tech issue, of all things. Richard had asked me to check on some old photos from our cabin trips. He wanted to post a throwback for social media. The folder was buried deep on the shared family laptop, one we rarely used anymore. As I clicked through random vacation shots, I came across a video file I didn't recognize. No label, just a timestamp from the night of the storm. Out of habit, I double-clicked. The screen flickered, then, candlelight, shadows, the bedroom at the cabin. It was us. Me and Evan, lying side by side. My breath hitched before anything even happened. I fast-forwarded, my fingers trembling. There it was, the moment he reached up. The way I leaned in. God, it was all there. Silent, intimate, undeniable. I slammed the laptop shut. My heart pounded in my chest like it was trying to escape. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Why was it recorded? Was it accidental? Deliberate? Was this some twisted souvenir for him? Or just, what? The betrayal hit me harder than the guilt ever had. Because this changed everything. This wasn't just a blur of emotion and loneliness anymore. This was documented, stored, hidden, and I had never given permission, not even to myself, to revisit that night. I sat on the floor for what felt like hours, staring at nothing, my mind a blur of questions I didn't want answers to. I wanted to believe he didn't mean harm. I wanted to believe it wasn't intentional. But part of me, a part one could no longer silence, began to wonder. Had he been watching me long before that night? I didn't confront him right away. For 2 days, I barely spoke. I moved around the house like a shadow, smiling when needed, nodding when spoken to, but never meeting his eyes. Evan noticed. Of course he did, but he didn't ask. He waited. Just like always. That night, I knocked on his door. He opened it slowly, surprised but calm. Everything okay? No, I said. We need to talk. I didn't mention the video. Not at first. Instead, I asked the question that had been burning in the back of my throat since the cabin. Was any of this planned? He didn't flinch, didn't pretend to misunderstand. He sat down on the edge of the bed and looked at me, really looked. I never meant to hurt you, he said quietly, but I noticed things. How sad you looked when no one else was watching. How quiet the house felt when Dad left. I guess I wanted you to see me. My breath caught. He wasn't apologizing, he was explaining, and somehow, that made it worse. You waited, I whispered. You got close. You touched a wound I didn't even know was bleeding. He looked down, voice soft. You let me. I did. And that truth cut deeper than anything. Because now, I didn't know what hurt more. That he had wanted me all along. Or that maybe, deep down, I had wanted to be wanted. I haven't told anyone. Not Richard, not a friend, not even in some anonymous forum online. Just, here, now, to you. Because I still don't know what to make of it. There was no meltdown, no confrontation, no consequences, at least not the ones people expect. But every time Evan walks past me in the hallway, I feel it. That night didn't end. It just settled into us. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had locked that door. Other times, I wonder what would have happened if I had never pulled away. What haunts me most isn't what we did. It's what I felt. How seen I was, how wanted. How alive. It wasn't love, not in the way the world defines it. But it was something. Something that didn't ask for permission. That slipped through the cracks of a hollow marriage, and landed in the arms of someone I was never supposed to feel anything for. And now, I carry that moment like a secret, one I visit in silence. When no one's looking. Sometimes I still feel his eyes on me. Sometimes I want to turn around and look back. So tell me. If you were in my place? If you were cold, invisible, and aching to feel human again. And someone reached for you in the dark. Would you have shut the door? Or would you have let yourself feel alive for the first time in years?